Welcome to the land of Bharat, what we now call the Indian subcontinent. My name is Vivek Ram and I am the Senapati of the Vanar Sena Studios. Today we are going to talk about Indian stories and their relevance to our times today. What do I mean by Indian stories? Are they from India? Not really. When I say Indian stories, they belong to the entire subcontinent. They belong to Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Burma, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, all the way up to even Malaysia and Singapore. These stories have spread across the land. These stories have spread with travelers. These stories have come back from various locations, and there are temples and cultures that celebrate them. Even today, we see them on various symbols, various statues all across these regions. And these stories are relevant to us, all these characters. If I talk about Ram or Sita or Hanuman, Indra, Vayu, all these Shiva, Shakti, all these characters have utmost relevance to our day-to-day lives, even today. Let me start with a simple story. Let me talk about the story of Durga. In the stories, in the Puranas, the Devas were fighting the Asuras, and then there was this really strong Asura called Mahishasur. Mahishasur had the ability to change forms. The Devas were of course defeated and were sent running. In a desperate bid for help, they combine their forces and they call upon the primordial feminine force, Durga. Durga of course appears, takes up arms, fights Mahishasur, kills Mahishasur, and it's a good day for everyone. Now let's take a story like that and see what we've done with it. Here we go.
Welcome to the land of Bharat, or what we now call the Indian subcontinent. Every age has warring factions, and this ancient time was no different. The Devas and the Asuras were always at war over who could attain ultimate dominance of all known realms. One such Asur was the mighty Mahishasur, quite literally a bull of a man who turned out to be a little too masculine for the Devas to handle. Their male egos crushed, the Devas were advised to rely on their combined feminine energies to rescue them. Through their efforts, they brought forth a force of strength and valor more powerful than anything any man had ever seen. A primordial force of nature, brandishing the most deadly weapons and riding a menacing tiger, she made her way towards... Or maybe not all of those weapons and unnecessary aggression stuff. That just feels like the male version of the story. Although, like most powerful women, she did manage to make the bull-headed man submit, and quite effortlessly at that. This invincible, impassable, feminine force of protection and strength is who we know as Durga.
I hope you've enjoyed that story. If you've noticed that from what I've just told you guys, there's been a slight change to that. We reinterpreted that story. Now in today's talk, we're going to talk about why reinterpretation is necessary and why the stories are relevant. We'll start with probably the relevance of these stories. Let's look at the current issues that concern us. We're talking about equality, we're talking about gender bias, we're talking about race, we're talking about the strong versus the weak, we're talking about how people are oppressed and subjugated. What do these stories have to teach us? Let's start with our very name, Vanar Sena. Where does this name come from? 5,000 years ago in this land, there was this prince called Ram. Ram, of course, was exiled to the forest. Along with him went his wife Sita and his brother Lakshman. Sita was kidnapped by this Rakshasa called Ravan, and then Ram goes looking for Sita. Initially, he finds no help, and finally he finds these group of beings in the forest, the Vanars. We don't know what these beings were. And he asks them whether they can help him find his wife. The Vanars, of course, agree, and they find Sita with the Rakshasa king of Lanka, Ravan. Of course, Rakshasas, we won't go into the nitty-gritties of who they were, but let's look at them as a different culture as today. Instead of calling them demons like we normally do, these were probably beings of a different culture. The Vanars find Sita, Ram agrees, Ram thanks them, Ram decides to go for war. The Vanars are so impressed by this man's ability to be determined and go all the way down to Lanka to fight Ravan and find his wife. They're inspired by his love, they're inspired by his determination, that they come together to fight for him. they decide to volunteer for him. This is the first example that's been recorded of a voluntary organization. It's one of the most relevant things even today when we try to volunteer for things that we really believe in. Let's look at another story from the Puranas this time. This is a story of Vishnu and Shiva. So Vishnu was approached by the Devas. The Devas and Asuras were always fighting, as they always do, and the Devas are on the losing side again. They come to Vishnu asking for his help. Now Vishnu has no stake in this game, but he agrees because they've come to ask for help. He agrees. He fights with the Devas and still there's no headway. They're still losing. So he goes to Shiva. Shiva, of course, another being who has no stake in this game. They're both outsiders as far as this fight is concerned. But Shiva is deep in meditation. Vishnu tries to wake him up. Being unsuccessful after many attempts, Vishnu plucks out his own eye to offer it to Shiva so that he can grace Vishnu to give him something that can help him win a war that belongs to neither of them. This is one of the primary examples of selflessness that we see in these stories. There is a party here that is willing to give up all that he has so that he can win a war for someone else, just because they came and asked him for help. It's fascinating how something like this is deep rooted in a very, very simple story. We see many such examples. Why are these stories important though? What do these stories do to our society? If you look at the way history has worked, and if you look at how these stories have been passed on through history, there are two things that art does. Of course, stories in a way is art. It is expression. And art has this very, very high impact on society in a way that you can either change the way society thinks or you can propagate the way society thinks. In these stories, what we see is that either society has decided to change, society has decided to form an opinion, and these stories help propagate those ideas. Or there are people who want society to change, and then we start reinterpreting these stories. And we change the format of the stories, and we see how we can change how society thinks as a whole. Whether it's people who want to do good or whether people who want to subjugate, we see stories about gender fluidity, we see stories about how gender fluidity is bad, we see how women empowerment is such an amazing thing in the stories, and then we see stories where women have been subjugated and controlled. We also see stories where there is slavery. So there are different kinds of stories for different kinds of ideas. So this is where we come to the idea of the need for reinterpretation of these stories. Let me give you an example of how it's been done before. It's not something new that we do now, but it's been done for centuries. It's how the human species has always propagated ideas. And that's exactly what these stories are doing. Today, of course, they're religious in many ways for whatever needs that the society has, but these were all never meant to be religious in the first place. These are meant to be stories that kind of passed on a certain idea. Let's look at the example of the Ramayana. It's the biggest example that we have today about how these stories can be reinterpreted over and over and over. Let's start right at the beginning. So the first version of the Ramayana that we know of is the Valmiki Ramayana. Valmiki was supposed to have composed this Ramayana around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, some say even 7,000 years ago. Initially it was composed orally, and then of course it was passed down orally for a while before it was written in its current form that we know today. In the Valmiki Ramayana, in this land that we call Bharat, there was a prince called Ram. This prince belonged to this place called Ayodhya in the north of India, and his father was Dashrath, who was king of Ayodhya. Ram was sent away for exile to the forest because of political reasons within the kingdom, and then with him went his wife Sita and his brother Lakshman. They spent about 13 years in the forest, and 3 of them spent their time in the forest with sages, learning, living in nature, with eating off the land, whatever they could do. In the 13th year, this Rakshasa king called Ravan kidnaps Sita and takes her away to Lanka. Ram, of course, is distraught. Ram and Lakshman go looking for her. They find the Vanars, they look for help. The Vanars help them. The Vanars go with Ram, cross the seas, attack Lanka, kill Ravan, and Vibhishan is made the new king of Lanka. And then Sita is, of course, rescued. Sita comes back in this Valmiki Ramayana. Ram asks Sita that because of the laws of the land, Sita cannot come back with him, so she can pick a husband of her choice. Sita, of course, decides to immolate herself. So she is the one who suggests that she will immolate herself, she will go into the sacrificial fire, and when she comes out pure, she's found a loophole in the law. They both happily go back to Ayodhya and they become king and queen of Ayodhya. The initial Valmiki Ramayana ends here. Then comes the sequel and the prequel. The sequel is the Uttarakanda and the prequel is the Balakanda. The reason I call it that is because by most people who've read the Ramayana and who've studied the Ramayana, by most historians and researchers, it is commonly believed that the Balakanda and the Uttarakanda are two additions to the Ramayana because of the style it's written in, because of the kind of material in there. Let me explain. Between the Ayodhya Kanda and the Yuddha Kanda, there is no mention of Ram being a Vishnu avatar or Ram being God in the Valmiki Ramayana. But in the Balakanda, it is mentioned that Vishnu comes as an avatar to become Ram. In the Uttarakanda, this is further specified, and then of course you have the addition of Sita being sent away a second time. This is social change. In the first version, it was enough that the laws of the land were kept up. In the second version, as we go into the sequel, society changes in a way that it is not okay that the woman has been with another man. Not that she's been with another man, but because she's lived under the roof of another man. This was not okay by society, and we start seeing this change in the Uttarakanda. Cut to a couple of centuries later, we have the Kamba Ramayana, which is a rewriting of the Ramayana. It is not the Valmiki Ramayana anymore. In the Kamba Ramayana, Ram is now a Vishnu avatar. He is now Lord Ram, he is now God Ram. And the Vishnu avatar has come in to fight good versus evil. There is a very clear bifurcation of how these concepts are put together in the book. Cut to a couple of more centuries, we have the Erutachan Ramayana, again talks of Ram as God. Then we have the Tulsi Ramayana, many centuries later, about maybe 20 to 25 centuries later is where we have the Tulsi Ramayana. The Tulsi Ramayana is very, very unique. The Tulsi Ramayana is completely a religious book. Ram and Sita are gods. Ram is a Vishnu avatar, Sita is a Lakshmi avatar, Lakshman is an avatar of Sheshnag. It is very, very clear. Everyone's a god right from the start of the book. Ram now goes into battle smiling, everyone's peaceful, he already knows the end. Ravan knows that the end is coming to him and everyone accepts it blissfully. Now we have a very religious narrative, we have a god narrative. Why was this necessary? Was this necessary because people wanted a god? Or was it necessary because this idea had to be pushed forward? We don't know this for sure. But we also know that during this time in history, religion started playing a much bigger role. And people did not want a hero like we had before. People wanted a god. If you look at the Valmiki Ramayana is a story of a hero who's in love with his wife. His wife is his equal. His wife is very, very well versed in statescraft. She wins every argument with him and they are in love. It's a complete love story between two equal partners. As we move away from the Valmiki Ramayana towards Kamba and Erutachan and then Tulsi, and then of course all the later retellings, Sita gets completely sidelined. As the role of women in society changes and as the role of women in society needs to be moved in a certain direction, we have this entire story changing with the same people, with the same characters. There is Ram, there is Sita, there is Lakshman, there is Hanuman, there is Ravan. The characters have not changed, but these stories have started moving. These reinterpretations were necessary so that society could move in a certain way. We see the same thing even with a character like Indra, for example, where in the Vedic time, and we talk about the Vedas being one of the initial literatures in the land, in the Vedic time, Indra is the hero, the number one. There is no competition to Indra. There is no Shiva that competes with Indra. There is no Vishnu that competes with Indra. Indra is the primary, the alpha. As we move towards the Puranic time, people needed gods. People needed more powerful god. People needed more powerful entities that they could look up to. So you had Vishnu and Shiva. And Vishnu and Shiva rose to power and became more powerful in the stories. Indra got sidelined as this very political, scheming, lowly deva. And this is again a transition of stories as society changes. This is why we end up reinterpreting all these stories so that we can also look at how society functions. Do I want to accept the way society is? I will have a story using the exact same characters. Do I want to change society a certain way or induce an idea in society, then my stories will move in that same direction using the same characters. So when we relook at these stories and we look at whether it's the Ramayana, for example, as it has changed over a period of time, we have all these versions that I've already spoken about, and we have versions like the communist Ramayana. Have you heard of that? It would be interesting for you guys to go check out a Ramayana that speaks in that manner. When communism started picking up in India, they had the communist version of the Ramayana. You have the Muslim version of the Ramayana called the Mapala Ramayana. It is not in text, it was orally passed on. And then you have versions like what you have today, which you have people like Devdutt Patnaik who are writing versions of the Ramayana. There's also this fantastic version of the Ramayana called Sita Sings the Blues by this artist called Neena Pale. And it talks about the Ramayana from Sita's perspective. What must a woman have gone through during that period? These are all reinterpretations that talk about what society is like. These stories are not about the stories themselves. These stories are always about what society is facing at that moment in time. And it's fascinating to see how this change occurs, which is why reinterpretation is necessary. Every time you want to put a story forward, you have to look at the current context and see if the story still makes sense. Sometimes a story could be bigoted, sometimes a story could be racist, but then you try to see what you can do in that scenario to change the narrative of the story. If you look at something like even the Amar Chitra Katha, we all grew up reading it, but then it biases the audience towards fair-skinned devas and dark-skinned asuras. That needs reinterpretation today because our society has changed. And it was amazing for when it first came out, but it was unknowingly or unwillingly biased. And we need to reinterpret these stories. The reason I do these stories is because we feel this need of reinterpretation, especially in the context of the world that we live in today. I love these stories. I grew up with these stories, and for me, I live and breathe these stories. So these stories are personal. But when I talk about these stories need to come out in a way that makes sense. It cannot be the same old narratives. They need reinterpretation. If I have a subject matter that I would like to discuss with you, I would love to do it in a way that can be done through a story. And why do we do this through animation? Because that's the medium that I'm most familiar with. That's the medium that I love. And it is an art form that meets another art form that is completely visual and that can disconnect you from your current reality. This is not something that just we can do, but this is something that all of us can do. This is something that even you can try with these stories, because these stories belong to all of us. These stories do not have an initial author, or they do not have an ownership. These stories belong to you and me. These stories have been told to us by our grandparents, by our parents. Every grandparent's version is a version. It's not the original story. There is no such thing at this point. So it's completely open to reinterpretation. And this is why this becomes so essential in today's time, when we see greed, when we see race issues, when we see subjugation and power and politics. These stories become a beautiful way to kind of walk in to a new world and to help people believe in the things that you would want them to believe in. I hope you've enjoyed this talk. This has been a fascinating experience for me. Thank you very much